Welcome, my friends, to the Happy by Mistake pod, building an abundant mindset for life and business. If you're a small business owner, entrepreneur, practitioner, or perhaps an executive feeling tapped out in their career, then you've come to the right place. All right, let's dive into the latest episode. Okay, well, today we have the great pleasure of welcoming in and having a conversation with Nick Prefontaine. He is a three-time best-selling author, a successful entrepreneur, a very renowned speaker, actually named a top motivational speaker of 2022 from Yahoo Finance. He is the founder and CEO of Common Goal. He's developer of the S.T.E.P system, which we're going to go into today. And Nick is also the survivor of an extremely traumatic brain injury that he sustained at 14 years old. And I think this is really where we are going to begin. Welcome, Nick, to the Happy by Mistake pod. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to speak with you today. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Corey. I've since a little while ago when we had our pre-interview, I've been looking forward to this, so I'm excited to be here today.
Okay, great. Well, why don't we just dive right into it then? Can you give us a little bit of the backstory on that injury that you sustained at 14 and sort of that, initial path to recovery that you went through? Because it's a really amazing and inspiring story as far as I'm concerned.
Sure, absolutely. And for lack of a better term, I think my life kind of starts at that moment. At that moment when I was at ski club with my friends. I was only in eighth grade, so my friends and I had all brought our snowboard gear onto the bus to get ready, so we wouldn't miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And we got to the mountain and headed right for the chairlift, where the rest of the class they headed inside and wasted time, a few runs, getting ready and horsing around and everything, but not us. We were dialed in. We were serious. So we headed right for the chairlift as soon as we got there. Then on the way up, Corey, we noticed that it was very icy because it had been raining. We did notice that people were wiping out everywhere. And the chairlift actually went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And the whole raining earlier in the day and the iciness didn't bother us. We were pretty experienced. So I knew going right over the terrain park that I had to go off the biggest jump in the terrain park. It was calling my name, if you will. So I got to the top, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. And going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, and that's the last thing that I remember.
Wow. Wow.
So due to the severity of my injuries, they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. They couldn't because it was too windy, so they had to send in an ambulance. And out of the 6 paramedics, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot, and I needed that to be able to breathe. And he was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. And Corey, there are still several things that I can't explain because of the accident, and now I know that one of them is the reason that I'm here with you today, you and your listeners. So no matter the severity of your crisis, your decision to take action is your first step. So then something else I learned was, although I wasn't wearing a helmet, the thing that I was wearing was a pair of goggles. And my goggles, I learned that they not only braced my fall, they were really thick with a lot of padding. So as I continued to hit my head and continued to roll down the mountain, my goggles, with each impact, they mysteriously, or depending on what you believe, not so mysteriously moved, because I believe that everything happens for a reason. So that was the second thing. And then
So that was a protective. So these goggles that are not meant for that were actually the way that the people that were there described it as it was moving around, sort of shielding you. Is that what you're saying?
That's
Yeah,
accurate. Yeah,
amazing,
like with
amazing.
each impact. Yeah. So
Wow.
the third thing, and I always just remember this. Just there's three things. So once I got to the hospital, I was out in
Mm-hmm.
the hospital, and I was in a coma, and the doctors came into my room to share the news, the prognosis, and what happened and everything. And as you can imagine, and with anyone that's dealt with hospitals, which I'm sure the vast majority of people on the earth have dealt with hospitals,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, they don't get paid to paint a rosy picture. So
Mm-hmm.
it was not so positive, not so positive, not so positive every time they came into my room. So I was out for the count. However, my mom intercepted them. And as they started to share the news in front of me, she said, no, no, not in front of him. So she made the doctor step outside my room. And once they were outside, that's where the doctors shared with my parents that I was in a coma. I suffered a traumatic brain injury. I was in a coma. They weren't sure how long I was going to be in the coma. And even if I came out, there was a good chance that I probably wouldn't be able to walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my parents, to their credit, just they accepted they took the information, they thanked the doctors, and then this allowed me to treat it like any other situation. So this was no different than any other challenge that I had faced up to this point in my life, and I wasn't aware of any of this. So I just treated it like anything else in my life. So once I was,
So sorry, when you say you weren't aware of any of this, you're saying you weren't aware of what the doctors were saying.
yeah,
That's what you mean.
whether it's unconscious, I was in a coma, but whether it's
Right.
unconsciously, subconsciously,
Okay.
it didn't get through to my mind because my mom stopped them, the doctors, when they tried to
Right.
share my room. So I was in a coma for 3 weeks. It was a partially induced coma because they had to induce me partially to wait for the swelling to come down in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I would have woke up and panicked and wondered what I was doing here. What did you do to me? And then the
Mm-hmm.
swelling would go up and I would have died. So I was in a
Mm-hmm.
coma 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month. And because my parents didn't allow the negative information to get through to me, what it allowed me to do was just to treat it like any other challenge. So
Mm-hmm.
as soon as I was aware of my surroundings, about a month after my accident, it just enabled me to get up, keep getting better, and that's what I focused on every day. So it was right along this time that I started to use a system to not only make a full recovery but run out of the hospital, and I'll go into a little bit detail on that.
Well, I want to get to that, and that's a lot of what we're here for, to hear about this. But I want to step back a second, if you'll permit me.
I'll permit you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. So, so then, because she didn't let that in, and you wake up and you're like, "Oh man, I got a serious challenge ahead of me." But it wasn't like I'm not going to ever be able to walk again. I'm not going to ever be able to feed myself. This was like, okay, how do I beat this? How do I overcome this? This was the mindset that you sort of woke up into. Is that correct?
Yeah, just a few differentiators here. So it wasn't like I woke up and I was like, oh gosh, I have all this in front of me. I just, okay, it happened and I got to deal with it.
Wow.
But, and this is interesting, we go back to right after I was transported to the rehab hospital a month after my accident, and that's where the memories start for me. So
Hmm.
I was there, and if you remember, I had to learn how to walk, talk, and eat again. So I was in a wheelchair at the time. If anything, it was a whisper at best. My voice where it was at the time. However, I overheard my parents talking with my team of doctors and therapists, and they said, okay, they would meet with them weekly. They were my support. They said, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? And Corey, I heard in the back of my head, no, you're going to run out. So I couldn't even talk at the time. Like, no one could hear me if I said this. However, I heard in the back of my head, no, you're going to run out. So then I was able to communicate that. And then running out of the hospital became our common goal. So that's where my whole company, the name, comes from. So, and the work that I'm doing today. So, and so much of it is surrounding the STEP system. So I'll just introduce like a 10,000 foot view of that.
Yeah, go for
So
it.
STEP is an acronym. It stands for support. So make sure that you have the support of your family and friends right from the beginning. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. It might sound overly simplistic, but this very act of getting everyone on board at the start can save you hours and hours of actual time, worry, and frustration in the future.
Nick, is this specifically this step system? Is it specifically for people with brain injuries? Does it extend to people with trauma in general? Does it extend to people with just a goal in general? Just start there and then go back into the details.
I'm so glad you asked the question. Yeah. So right now, just at the infancy, I guess you could say, of our company, Common Goal, it's primarily focused on trauma, like trauma, life challenge, or crisis survivors. And within that is brain injury. But that's just because I'm just starting out. The applications of this are enormous. Literally, it's the process that I've done, and I've dealt with things my entire life. So it's how I've approached anything that I've dealt with in my life whenever I'm presented with either starting a new business, like starting this business and establishing everything that we had to for this. I use the STEP system. I've used it all my life. So, and I'll share how that came up a little bit more if we get into detail on that. T is trust. So trust that once you take your first step, your next step is always going to be available to you. This also starts with trusting yourself. So trust that you have this voice inside of you for a reason. Follow it. And I already shared what happened with the voice inside of my head saying, no, you're going to run out of the hospital. And later, if we get to it, I'll share how that came up. That voice came up again, and it just kept getting louder and louder until it led me to what I'm doing today. So E is energy. Maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. And medication has the potential to get in the way of that. So obviously within reason here, Corey, that first night in the hospital after my accident cost $250,000. So if it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today. However, there's a time and a place for everything. Yeah. So a month after my accident, when I came out of the ICU, was a time that we needed to allow the body to heal itself. And then P is persistence. So once you take your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. By continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. So let me see, if I could share this story, because it's similar, the timing of it. I remember being in a wheelchair, and I'd start my day, just to give you an inside peek into that, I'd start my day and I would need help from my physical therapist to teach me how to shower again. Like, I had to learn everything all over again. So then I would have breakfast, and then I'd start my first therapy sessions of the day. Physical, occupational, and speech therapy. And I say first because I had double sessions of therapy 5 days a week. So after those first sessions, Corey, we broke for lunch, and it was at one of these lunches that a moment of doubt crept in. I can remember my mom, who was with me every day, going to every therapy and doctor's appointment with me. She was with me in my hospital room. And I can remember being in a wheelchair at the time and looking over my situation, and I just couldn't figure it out. I can remember turning to my mom and asking, am I ever going to be able to walk again? And she didn't hesitate. Of course you are. That's what we're doing here, so you can get everything back and we can go home. So this allowed me to continue to take my next step and to continue to go forward. And I like to share that story because so many of us have doubts. And people that hear my story will think, oh, yeah, okay, easy for you. You were 14, you got in an accident, you were in a coma, and you ran out of the hospital. That's great. You're a superhero. Well, I'm not a superhero. We all have doubts, and that's why I share that moment of doubt. So if you fast forward less than 60 days later at the rehab hospital in Boston, I realized my goal of running out of the hospital.
Wow.
And
Wow. Powerful.
thank you. I appreciate that. And really, it wasn't like my work was done. I had to continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. And I'll take a breath there because I know you're
Well,
jumping.
no, it's just amazing story and very inspiring, and I think I choked up a couple of times there, but that's okay because my daughters often tease me for getting choked up in movies or TV shows. In fact, once I choked up watching The Simpsons, if that tells you anything. But no, incredibly.
Well, you must have been into it then. You must have been really into the episode then.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
But it is a truly inspiring story. It's so powerful, the connection that you had with your mom and her strength and her belief too. And the fact that you heard this voice that said, you're going to run out of here, and then you did, is absolutely inspiring and amazing. Can I dive into some questions around the different steps of the program?
Yeah, we absolutely have time to go into that, and then I'll continue talking about my journey after that for sure. Yeah.
Okay, because what I'm always interested in, how do we operationalize, how do we put into action, this kind of wisdom, right? So let's go to the first one, support. I'm sure you've heard this before, but there are people who don't feel like they have a strong or even any support system. And maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But when someone approaches you with this objection, hey, you had an amazing family, amazing support system, I don't. What do you tell them?
As I'm sure you can believe, I get that quite often.
Yeah.
People that say, "Oh, well, easy for you. You had a supportive family. You don't understand my situation. I don't have a supportive family, and therefore, everything you're saying is null and void, and this can't work for me."
Right.
Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because support, one of the things, and I'll give your listeners at the end a way that they can download the entire STEP system for free.
Great.
One of the things that I talk about within that, within STEP, the ebook, is that your support doesn't need to be family. People always latch on, and especially accident victims and like a life challenge, crisis, or trauma, they latch on to the word family. And I don't have family. It doesn't have to be family. It can be a close friend. It can even be a neighbor. And even if you don't have any of that, your support is there. You just need to be open to it. So because you're locked into this tunnel vision of thinking it can only be family, you're shutting yourselves off to support that comes from everywhere. So if you have a friend that's always coming around, always asking you what they can do for you, what they can do to support you, what they can do to help you, that's a support. That's a form of support. It doesn't even have to be a friend, Corey. It can be a worker, a coworker. It can be a worker at the hospital. It can be a complete stranger just asking you if they can do anything for you, if they can help you.
It could be a network of people that have experienced the same thing as you have, and you've just got to reach out to that community, right? That support system. And sometimes it's that first step, right, that is the hardest. I heard you talk once about how important it is not to be ashamed to receive support or to reach out for support. And this can be really challenging for people. I think, generally speaking, when we're under a great deal of stress or hardship, a lot of people have a tendency to go into the foxhole, right? Which makes sense. They're going down there to protect themselves. But in the process, they tend to cut themselves off from potential areas of support. So if you have a brain injury, for instance, there are lots of brain injury associations. There are lots of, social media groups, people that meet in person even around this that can be part of that support system. Does that
Yeah,
sort of jive with what you're talking about?
yeah, that's very accurate.
Yeah,
There's a tendency to, so you could have everything in place. You could have your team. You could have your advocates that are supporting you. You could have everything in place, but if you're not willing to receive the support, it doesn't matter because none of it will be effective. So, I mean, it's okay to receive help at different points in your life.
Yeah, and when you're down in the foxhole, it's hard to reach out for support, but it's probably the most important thing you can do is to start that connection. Thank you for that. Now, the second step is the trust piece.
The second step, I like you inserted that.
Yeah, and you said trust that you know this this action is going to work out, and that every time you take that next step, you're closer towards that goal. How do you help somebody to sort of trust their path forward?
So there are a few key elements of trust that I talk about, and the first one is that blind faith. So I'm not talking like religion here or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that taking that next step. Like how do you just you, like you and I, how would you know, hypothetically, if you take one step, how would you know that you're going to be all right and you can take the next step after that?
Like a physical step?
Yeah, the answer is
in a way.
don't.
I guess you never really know, right?
No, like you just, in especially trauma survivor, trauma, life challenge, or crisis, you just have to take that one step, and just keep going forward and having that blind faith. That's one of the key things about trust that I talk about.
So a lot of people's next question is going to be, how do I get blind faith? And I'm wondering if in your perception of things, it's connected to something that I talk about a lot, which is, shifting from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance, and how we get there is a complicated process. How do you sort of perceive it? How do you, when somebody says, I don't have your blind faith, what do you say back to them?
Well, it's not my blind faith, or it's not your blind faith, or it's not like this ephemeral thing over here, like an entity over here. It's, you have to have blind faith in yourself, and especially if you just suffering any kind of traumatic event, life challenge or crisis, you have to have faith in yourself, or else what are we doing?
Well, what if somebody says, I don't have faith in myself? What do you say to them?
Well, I would say go back to support, and all within support. I know we have a lot of time here, but we don't have time to go through each little, because within support, there's several drop down, several bullets within that. So I would say if you don't have that blind faith, to go back to your support and go through each level. Go through like the first one is advocate. You got to make sure that you have your advocate, and like go through each one, and then once you get that, you work your way down to trust and blind faith. Then chances are once you get back to that, you'll be able to move forward into the rest of the step system.
You also mentioned trust in the context of, I think you referred to it as being in integrity, of being sort of true to your word. So if you commit to, doing your exercises that day, you're going to follow up and do it. Now, just in the little time I've known you, I've been impressed with your will and your determination. It's inspiring. What about somebody that's having more trouble with that? Maybe they're living a little bit in fear. Maybe they are doubting themselves and they've gone to their support group and they're getting a little bit of momentum, but they're finding it hard to keep that discipline going, taking that next step, doing those exercises. How do we get to that place where we are getting up every day and doing those things that we need to do to move forward?
So what you have to do, and this is like I said at the beginning, this is the step system is really the mindset and the lens that I see life through. So to me, in that case, I would again go back to the beginning of step, go through each bullet, each drop down, and then once you get past blind faith, the next thing is accountability, is the accountability that you were talking about. And you need to, it's almost integrity too. You need to do what you say and say what you're going to do. Well, the other way around, I always confuse those, but.
Well, there's an interesting concept I heard once about, and I'm trying to replace who said it, but it was around the idea of, if you're trying to build discipline in your life, if you are trying to create a new habit like running or something, I think it's I think it was the Atomic Habits book, James Clear, where he said, okay, so if you've got this goal of working out every day, if you're just focused on the goal, if you're just focused on that, it's going to be really hard to keep up that discipline. It's more about establishing a connection between your identity and that task. So an example he gives is, I'm the kind of person that doesn't miss workouts, right? And the more you connect with that identity, the easier it is to live up to those actions, those things that you have committed to. That seems to align a little bit with what you're talking about. Is that correct?
That's kind of all right. So what that makes you think of is when I was in the hospital, my parents had affirmations all over my room. So and this is even before I could walk. So everywhere I looked in the room was like example. With each step I take, I am getting closer and closer to accomplishing my goal. And then I would look somewhere else. With each day and each step, I am moving towards my goal of running out of the hospital. Like I would have goals and affirmations on every wall of me. So I think what you're referring to, that one example that you use of I'm a person that doesn't miss workouts. I think it's so important to surround yourself with positivity. Because if you do the opposite, it's certainly not going to help you accomplish what you're looking to do.
Okay. Now, energy is another piece of the STEP program, and I wanted to pick your brain on this one a little bit because people that have suffered injury. I myself have a health condition that leaves me drained of energy much of the time. Um, so for me, energy is a scarce and incredibly valuable commodity in my life. What do you say to somebody that, maybe is in the early stages of a traumatic recovery, maybe somebody like me that deals with fatigue a lot? What do you say to them about maintaining their energy?
Great question. So what I did when I was in the hospital, I go back to that, is it was like a I don't know, acute, I guess is the word. So like the only thing I was focused on was getting, and my family and parents were focused on, my support team was getting me off of the medication as soon as possible, because they knew of the body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. However, after finishing rehab and after being out of the hospital, I had to start to work to get the toxins out of my body. And for that, I started to see a naturopathic doctor 3 years after running out of the hospital. And with that, it was the whole program was based on your blood type. So it was a pretty big commitment for someone that was only 16 years old. I would have a diet based on my blood type that I had to stick to, and as you can imagine, in high school, that's not the easiest thing.
Yeah.
Then I had supplements with each meal that I had to consume, and then most importantly, every 2 to 3 weeks, I would drive back to the institute, the naturopath, to get all these kinds of different treatments. Just to name a few off the top of my head: foot bath, colonic, acupuncture, hyperbaric chamber, infrared sauna, fango therapy, where they put hot clay on you. So I would get those all every 2 to 3 weeks. And I can remember 3 years after, the doctor saying to me that, one of the doctors at the institute, because I would have a review every six to 12 months to really check my progress and see how I was doing compared to when I came in there initially. And he looked at all my levels and he said, "Nick, you've done such a great job with sticking with the program, the diet, the supplements, and most importantly, getting all these treatments, that really I don't know as if there's much that we can do for you anymore. So you can certainly keep coming here for maintenance, but we're kind of at the end of the road, so to speak." So it was right, and the whole reason I go into this, it was right around this time that I was introduced to my next master, my next teacher, if you will, and that's Dr. Ming Wu. So I met him at a business dinner in March of 2009. He worked on me right at the table. He gave me Tui Na, and I was hooked. So instead of going to the naturopath, I started going to him for Tui Na and cupping. And Ming was actually the one, and this was part of our conversation, Corey. I don't know if you remember, prior to this, that Ming was actually the one that taught me how to meditate. And who taught
Right.
me to meditate. So it's over 15 years now. And the way that this is so important is because still to this day, I go and see him once every 5 weeks for Tui Na, and your audience can look it up. It's amazing. I still get it done once every 5 weeks. It's TUI space NA. See if there's anyone near them that can do this. I get that once every 5 weeks, and I also get a myofascial release or craniosacral massage once every 5 weeks to help keep my energy high, and so I'm able to impact and affect the most amount of people possible. So anyone that's struggling with their energy and kind of looking for answers, that's what I always recommend, because it's something that I'm doing currently. I'm doing it right now, and I think if it's good enough for me, it's definitely good enough for everyone else.
Well, thank you for that. And, the thought comes to mind, maybe those things aren't available to certain people. you listed quite a lot of therapies there, but one thing that you did talk about was meditation, and that's something that is available to everybody. And I myself find that it's very helpful with energy because, in my interpretation of things, we tend to have this pattern of constantly projecting into the future, often with maybe anxiety or things that I need to do, or fear, or sometimes excitement, or we're sort of going into the past. Sometimes it's pleasant memories, sometimes it's recrimination. And there's a lot of energy I find that gets expended in that mental process of projecting forward or going back. And meditation is about being present, being in the now, experiencing the moment as each moment passes. And I do find that's a source of energy. Is that what it's like for you?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Garrett, actually, what I'm going to do, I wasn't going to do it because I know we're on this interview, but I can multitask. I can do two things. I can do two things at once here. So
Go for it.
what I'm looking to do is pull up my talk that I did back in June in New York City. Um, that was my introduction to stillness was a coma, and it's only 6.5 minutes, believe it or not. And it talks about meditation and exactly how I was introduced to it and what Ming taught me. And it's only 6.5 minutes long. So everyone, if meditation seems like something you built up and placed on this pedestal of
Hmm.
you can only do it if you're a monk and you have your head
Yeah.
shaved and you're
Yeah.
you're sitting cross-legged on the top of a mountain. That's the furthest thing
Yeah.
from meditation.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
So you'll send me that link, and I will put it in in the episode notes for everybody to access.
Yeah, and what I could do, I could just share it. I'll share it with you right now, right here on this. Actually, you know what? It's not letting me do that right now. Anyway, I will share it with you after, and that way they're able to go check that one out as well.
Yeah, I'll put that in the episode notes. And I liked what you said about this idea of putting meditation on a pedestal, and that it's so remote and things like that. Hopefully most people have gotten to the point where they don't think that anymore, but some people still do. One of the ways that I sort of explain that to people is you cannot really do at least mindful meditation without your brain wandering, right? So that's one of the most common complaints. My brain always wanders. I can't get into Zen state, things like that. We're not talking about a Zen state. When your mind wanders, the act of noticing without judgment and returning to your breath, returning to your body, that is meditation, right? So,
That's exactly what I talk about in the video,
right,
and
right.
that's why I'm excited. I'm excited that you brought that up. So I am actually able to share it. So I'm going to share it with you right in our it says studio chat. So you have the link right there to the
Okay.
YouTube to that video.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that, and I'll for sure share that in the show notes because that's great. Yeah, and once you realize that you can't do mindful meditation without your brain wandering, which it naturally does, that changes everything.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
I,
wonderful. So,
I almost don't want to. I have so many more thoughts on that, but I don't want to. I don't want to ruin the video. So I want everyone to go there and check it out.
okay, okay. Well, I'm
It
gonna check it
lays it
out.
all out.
I'm gonna check it out. Um, Now I heard you share on a pod by Clint Davis that you appeared on. The podcast is called Asking Why. That and maybe I'm skipping ahead, and I'm going to ask you to go back and tell the next part of the story of your recovery. But you got to a point where you were door knocking for real estate foreclosures, people that were close to or in danger of going into a foreclosure process, and you were turning that into a business that helped you help them. And this was very, very early in your recovery process, maybe so early that people found it hard to believe you were doing it. But I heard you say that that whole experience was actually an essential part of your recovery. Can you sort of get us up to speed, sort of post hospital, the next stage of your recovery, and how this idea of the door knocking fit into that?
So you're giving away my story. You're giving away all the good nuggets of the story. No,
Oh, am I? Okay, you go ahead. You go ahead. You
I'm
tell the
just kidding.
story. You
I'm
tell the
just kidding.
story.
It was it's like looking back at it, it's a little surreal that only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab, I was door knocking pre-foreclosure doors or homeowners that have received the notice of default letter from the bank. So my job was to see if I could schedule an appointment for them to meet with one of our investors the following week, and they would go in depth with them about exploring potentially buying their home. And I mean, looking back at this, because Corey, you can relate to this. The When you're younger, time is compressed. So something like 6 months, 12 months, 18, even 24 months seems like a lifetime.
Yeah.
However, it's not a
Yeah.
lot of time at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took a mentor, my mentor pointing that out to me. She said, well, wait a minute. So you got in your accident, you were in a coma, and you did all your recovery, and you ran out of the hospital. Only 18 months after finishing rehab, you were knocking on pre-foreclosure doors. So it kind of made me like think and sit back, and I was like, oh yeah, that is kind of a big deal. And the way that she phrased it to me, and I tend to agree with her, and I've kind of adopted it, is that going door to door so soon after my accident, only 18 months after finishing rehab, was really part of my recovery. Going door to door and helping people out of their unfortunate situation. So I did that throughout high school, and then after high school, I got into real estate, uh, was helping buyers and sellers as a realtor for years, and then in 2012, I developed an issue with my voice. So I was looking everywhere, and I couldn't figure out what was up with my voice and why I sounded different. And um, I can remember that I was out to dinner with just my mom and I. So she noticed that my voice sounded different. And I remember brushing it off because I didn't want to accept it. Oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the steps that I'm mistaking, and I think we can all miss a step if we're not paying attention. My voice gave out, and that was Columbus Day of 2012, and I can remember working on a holiday, which I would usually do, and by the end of October, my voice wasn't coming back. So I had previously seen my general physician who examined me and gave me a full physical. He said everything was fine, he didn't say anything wrong with me. He recommended that I see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And then I saw allergists, everyone. I finally wound up in a voice specialist office in almost a year later, in August of 2013. And um, that's where I really started my journey of getting my voice back. And this guy heard me speak, walked in the room, heard me speak, and right away was like, oh, yeah, that we deal with that all the time. So I started getting Botox injections into my throat along with speech therapy again to really get my voice back. And I mean, looking back on it, it's a little surreal that um, like I went through this for 8 years. I really went through it for 8 years, but I received Botox injections for 7 years, and it's been quite the journey.
Well, an incredible journey, and one where you showed just incredible persistence and resilience. And I think that's where I have some interest is, going back to that stuff with your voice, going back to the initial processes of recovery, going back to the door knocking, when you tired, when you just didn't feel like knocking on another door, what did you do to sort of tap back into that motivation?
Well, I mean, I looked at the fact that, oh, okay, have I been going too much and need like a break, need like 12 hours or 24 hours
Mm.
to kind of rest and get my energy back. Um, and that's that, and I kept taking the next step. So I mean, something else that I left out in there was how I really am. I don't want to say stumbled, because I wanted to talk about that voice that came back to me. So all throughout my life, I've always, since I got out of high school, I've always had this voice in the back of my head that's always telling me, whether it was a realtor, an investor, knocking on doors, whatever, it's always been saying to me, yeah, Nick, that's great, but what you really need to be doing is helping trauma survivors to get through their trauma and then thrive with the rest of their lives. And that voice has always been there. And it's been saying you need to be telling your story from stage and helping trauma survivors thrive with the rest of their lives. And I thought I was scratching that itch because with our real estate coaching and consulting company, I've been able to scratch that itch. So I've been able to tell my story from stage once or twice a year since 2016, 2017. And I always thought, oh, okay, that's making the voice go away. Well, I mean, yeah, yes and no. It wasn't really, because that wasn't what that really wasn't it. I really wasn't exploring this in full detail. So um, it finally got to the point where someone saw me speak in September of 2019, and they approached me after and said that I'm not trying to steal you from your dad and your family real estate company. However, if you're ever looking to fine tune your message and bring it to another level so that it has maximum impact and you're able to help the most amount of people possible, I can introduce you to some people and help you get started. Well, that was in 2019, and I was still going through the final throes of my voice issue. So I still had some more Botox treatments to go, and actually, when this woman saw me speak, it was still strained. My voice was still strained. However, she gave me her card, and then in May of 2021, I finally reached out to her and said, "Okay, I'm ready," because I was done. The voice issue had worked its way out of my system, and I was finally ready. And part of the reason why I made this call, Corey, was this voice just kept getting louder and louder. It wouldn't go away no matter what I did. So I reached out to her. She introduced me to her mentor, who's become my mentor, Trisha Brooke. And that was a woman that I was referring to earlier in the story, that kind of pulled the step system out of me and made me realize certain things reflecting back. So since that call with her, there has been, in May of 2021, there's been no voice in the back of my head. So what that's evidence to me of is, and I'll just I'll shed a little light on what she helped me do. So I shared my goals with her, and I said, "Do you think that's possible?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, great. What do you think I should do?" She said, "The speaker salon." In New York City, and that's what I did in the fall of 2021. Me and 6 or 7 other speakers commuted to New York City for 6 weeks in a row, and working on our talk on stage at the Triad Theater, our like 6 to 10 minute talk. And no, it was more 10-minute talk. And then on the final week, we got to perform for influencers, TEDx organizers, other event organizers that book speakers to speak. So during that time of the speaker salon, Trisha pitched the idea of what it would look like to work with her one-on-one. And I just wanted more of her. So I said yes. She said that she works specifically with speakers to help them build out their speaker platform. Corey, I had no idea what that was. I didn't know what a speaker platform was. However, like I said, I just wanted more of her. So I said yes. And I started working with her one-on-one in January of 2022. She was the one, that's when I launched my company. She's the one that helped me launch Common Goal, develop the STEP system, and develop all my talks. My keynote talk, which is 50 to 60 minutes long, I delivered it just earlier this week for the Brain Injury Association of Vermont at their annual conference. And that was over, I mean, total, it was almost an hour, but yeah, it was almost 60 minutes. And prior to her, the most that I had spoke before was maybe 15 or 20 minutes max. And now I'm giving 50 to 60 minute keynotes for brain injury associations all over the country.
Well, that's wonderful. And I think having a mentor like that can make an incredible difference in anybody's career, anybody's life. The voice that you spoke of, that sense of, this inspiration, this itch that you had to scratch, it seems like it came out in service, right? Where you moved into how can I be of most service to others that have experienced what I've experienced. Is that right?
It became of service. At first, I'm not even sure that it. At first, I'm not even sure that it was. At first, it was so I could get this voice to shut up. It wouldn't go away, no matter what I did. So at first, it was to because if I'm following that, then I don't have to worry. Like, I don't have to worry about finances or anything. It'll all take care of itself because I know that I'm doing what I was put on this earth to do. However, now that I've developed the STEP system and developed several keynotes and launched Common Goal, now it's, yes, it becomes of service. It was a process of becoming of service. And what goes back to it is if I'm following that voice in the back of my head, if I'm listening to that guidance and following through with it, I know that I'll be taken care of. Like, my needs will be met. I'll be taken care of as long as I'm following that, and that hasn't led me astray.
For somebody that doesn't have as strong a voice inside them telling them which direction to go, telling them stick with it and it'll work out, what's your recommendation to somebody that wants to access that level of intuition or that inner wisdom or that voice, as you call it, whatever it is? What would be your advice to somebody trying to find that, trying to trust it?
So the link that I shared, my introduction to stillness, was a Coma. I would say check that out, number one. And in there, it gives you ways that you can start your stillness practice, because that's what led me to being able to tune into that voice. Because prior to meditation, and it took you, Corey, it took you asking me this question to realize this. Prior to meditation, I wasn't an atheist, but I was more of an agnostic. Like, okay, there's no way to know that there is this thing out there helping and guiding us. That was back in 2009, and I can say today that absolutely I believe in a higher power, and I think the reason for that is meditation. And even if you never get there, which I'm not trying to sell religion here, or like the universe or God. I'm not trying to sell that here. I'm telling you what has worked for me and what has been my experience, and hopefully that's able to help other people that are out there.
So it's going into stillness, going into presence, and you never know what you're going to find. Is that a good summary?
I'm trying to leave that space for that stillness.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you this. let's take the example of someone starting a business or a practice of some kind, and they're doubting their path forward. So they're feeling doubt about their ability to be successful. If you, and this is a hard question to answer, so I just want you to be playful with this. If you could speak to that person directly right now, somebody that might be listening to this podcast, and you had the chance to give them just one piece of advice or even ask them a question, what would it be?
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay.
I
Okay.
think there are so many people in this world who will start so many new endeavors with all this excitement and drive and energy, but then the moment things get hard, they quit.
Right.
And
Right.
you're not giving yourselves the ability to experience the magic. You experience the magic when you hang in there. When you hang in there through the suck, through the hard times, because it's not starting anything. You can't look at anything, Corey, and think that, oh, okay, I'm going to do this instead of what I'm doing, because that means that I'm never going to have any issues. People are just going to deposit money into my bank account and I never have to talk to anyone. You're going to have problems wherever you go, whatever you do. So that would be my advice. Just keep going.
Well, it's absolutely true, and it's also, like you talked about, when things get hard. It's also the experience and the way we think about failure, I think, right? Because most really successful entrepreneurs will say, I failed a million times before I succeeded, right? And for them, it was, a playful kind of experimentation and prototyping and learning and refining and keep digging and try something a little different and approach it a little different this way. And getting to the place was, I mean, as you said, the journey, the struggle itself was part of what drove them, right? So they weren't always focused just on an end goal. They were focused on the process, the prototyping, the experimentation, the grind itself was part of what they, enjoyed and got satisfaction from. The process of building, of creating, all of that stuff. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, yes, it does. And failure doesn't exist to me. And I don't mean that in a conceited way, or like an egotistical way. I mean that I don't look at anything in my life as a failure. I look at it as, okay, I did something, it didn't work, so then I adjusted and took action again, and I got close to where I wanted to go.
Yeah, you're preaching to the converted on this one. I agree with you 100%, and it's why I always talk about the idea of like prototyping, of being playful, of, you don't need to invest, $8,000 in some marketing strategy. Why don't you try something for a month for $300, be playful with it, see how it works, take in that information and adjust from there. We tend to get very black and white, total win, total failure, when really a more playful approach, a more experimental approach will serve us better, I think. Nick, what's your next big goal?
My next big goal, and I feel like I'm living it right now, which is getting on more stages and sharing the STEP system with more people, like yourselves and your listeners, and continuing to get my message out there. And I feel like I'm doing exactly that.
Well, there's also a thought that sort of came up as you were describing that is something I'm very fond of is mastery, not perfectionism, but mastery, where you try to get better, more masterful in the things that you identify that are important to you. And it sounds like that's just naturally who you are. What are you most proud of?
love this question. My voice issue, getting over that, because looking back at it, people hear about my snowboarding accident and having to learn how to walk, talk, median, and they think that's the most amazing thing, and oh my God, that must have been so hard. Uh, Candidly, Corey, I look at that as, well, just did whatever anyone else would do in that situation. I just dealt with what was in front of me, and as I'm learning later in life that no, that wasn't normal. However, I still to this day look at it as, oh, okay, that just happened. That something that happened to me when I was growing up, when I was 14. I was start to finish. I was only less than 3 months in inpatient rehab in the hospital in the ICU. I think what I'm most proud of is overcoming my voice issue, because that start to finish, I first started having issues with my voice. I mean, it was even before August of 2012, but it was in around that time, August 2012. And then if you fast forward in February of 2020, I received my last Botox injection. Well, for the next 6 months up till August, I was still dealing with, oh, there might still be something wrong with my voice, and working through issues like, I think spiritually, psychologically, and mentally too. Like, oh, am I still dealing with this? So I think I'm more proud of overcoming that than I am anything else, because that took 8 full years, 8+ years of working at it. And although I didn't know it at the time, applying the STEP system and keep making adjustments, keep improving, keep trying different things. And now I have my voice back.
Amazing. The level of, not giving up and determination that you brought to that. Is there a book or a movie that really inspired you? This can be a tough question for somebody like me with a bad memory, because I can think of the book but not remember the name. Is there anything that sort of stands out?
Frequency. The book is called Frequency by Penny Pierce. And I first read it in 2014, and I believe it really started me on this journey. There's a lot of inner, deep work from that particular author. And she comes out with a new book, a new level of it every few years. But Frequency by Penny Pierce was the book that started me on this journey. And I can really, looking back on it, the voice issue is such a big part of my journey, because it made me realize that after I got through that 8 years later, that, all right, I have something here. Because I did something to recover from my accident, my snowboarding accident, and then I did it again to get my voice back. Like, I have something here that I need to share. So, yeah, that book kind of got me started on the journey, I would say.
Sort of proof of concept, right?
Yeah.
What is the easiest way, as we've sort of come to the end of our time together here, what is the easiest way for people to find you? And again, I will include your contact information in the episode notes.
And that video.
And the video.
Yeah.
You
want to download what we covered, even though we went pretty in depth here about the STEP system. It's not all of it, so it's just like a 5,000 foot view of the STEP system.
Yeah.
So to download the entire STEP system for free, go to nickprefontaine.com/STEP, and that's going to teach you all about support, trust, energy, and persistence. And I kind of drew a blank here. I just gave you a direct link to the YouTube, but that talk is on my website as well.
Okay.
So they would be able to find it there. So all that work of going to YouTube for nothing, I would say. But that website to get the ebook directly is nickprefontaine.com/STEP.
Okay, well that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today, Nick.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you all for listening. As always, if you are doubting your ability to succeed, to make your goals happen, reach out to me at castleroadcoaching.com and I'll help you find the self-confidence, the self-motivation, and the inner wisdom that's just waiting to be harnessed. I'm Corey the coach. That's Nick Prefontaine. And between now and the next pod, I wish you a happy, engaged, and successful week. Bye for now.